So welcome. I hope you think you're in vision and anxiety conversation today. I'm Gina Campbell, and I teach at Wesley. And before I taught at Wesley, I was at Washington National Cathedral as a priest. And I also teach at the Center for Family Process. So any of you that are familiar with family systems thinking, that's another place and part of what I bring to this conversation today. So welcome to each of you. I want to start out, if you're amenable, with a few little exercises. So let me say that. I have a friend who says, I used to think the only reason I had a body was to carry my head around, because he was very proud of his thinking. But as science has continued to expand their understanding of the mind-body connection, we know that when the brain knows it now, the whole body knows it. And so how we are aware of, so where vision lives in our body, as well as where anxiety lives in our, who knows exactly where anxiety goes in your body? Migraine, backache, IG trouble. Yes, I mean, one of the parts of learning to think about vision is how it helps us pull ourselves out of some of that stuff as well. So vision, which is deep seeing, is an all over experience. It's not just what we do with our eyes. And so one of the things I want to invite us to think about today is how important our brain is, not just as an organism that thinks, but as the one that communicates to all of the body, functions with all of the body, and how important it is to keep it in optimum functioning condition. What does the brain need to function well? 3 things it needs to function well. Water. So if you have water, why don't you offer yourself a little sip right now? Be kind to your brain. And the brain needs plain water. Fizzy water, flavored water, coffee water, tea water. The brain reads that as food. So it's not, and why does it need the water? The brain works on electrical impulses. It needs the water to conduct its very capacity to think. So we need water. What else do we need for the brain to work? Oxygen. We need to breathe. So we're going to give our brain a little dose of oxygen right now. So here's what I want you to do. 3 breaths, but deep breath in, pause. Exhale, pause. Deep breath in, pause. So you with me? 3 deep breaths, in between every inhale and every exhale, pause. So just 3 nice, deep, slow breaths. What did you notice? Lots of wisdom teachers will tell you that the wisdom lives in the pause. So if we're frantically breathing and there's no pause, the possibility for wise vision to rise up is lessened, because we're not giving the space for that to make itself known. So the importance of the pause in breathing. Now, we don't do that all the time, but when we catch ourselves, None of you do this, but when I get in a meeting that's making me anxious, I feel my breath go short. I start breathing more shallow. Well, I'm not going to offer anything smart if I'm breathing from up here. So deeper breaths, observe the pause, pay attention to what rises up, breathe again. It positions us differently with ourselves and with what we might offer. The third thing the brain needs is what? Blood. It needs blood flow because blood flow helps wash and clean the brain. So there's a body of work called Brain Gym, GYM, like gymnasium, Brain Gym. And it's taught all over the world, and it offers exercises for different functions that the brain has to perform. So if you need flow in the brain, there's exercises for that. If you need calculating math kinds of things, there's something for that. If you're trying to connect the right and left sides, there's exercises for that. But this one is called Brain Buttons, and it's to stimulate blood flow to the brain. So use your thumb and your middle finger and find your collarbone. Can you feel your collarbone right there? And then if you slip right underneath it, do you feel it go in a little bit towards your ribs? You feel the little, there's an indent there, goes down a little bit. Right under there is your carotid artery. So you're going to just take those fingers and give it a gentle massage. So you're saying, blood, I want you to do your thing. My brain loves you. And you're not, your breath's going shallow right now because you're concentrating, right? Breathe deeper. And just notice what you notice. And because we do right and left always when we're paying attention to the brain, we take the same fingers of the opposite hand, find that same collarbone, notch down, gentle massage. And we're remembering a deep breath. Deep breath. Did you notice anything? Part of vision is being able to pay attention, to notice. The word notice is very important to vision, and you'll understand more about it. And if we can't notice something as tangible as our bodies, how do we notice this less tangible thing we call vision? And they're not disconnected. So find ways to be good to your brain every day so your vision is supported, because your brain has the water it needs, the air it needs, and the blood that it needs so that it can do its thing. So just a little reminder that our bodies are for more than carrying our heads around. They're also for supporting that nice head that does our nice work for us in vision. Whenever I work on something like this, I think about stories, little vignettes, not long stories, that to me communicate something about, in this case, vision. If I'm working on something else, I'd look for, and what I want to share with you are 5 really quick vignettes. They're really short stories, and each one of them to me says something about components of vision. So if you want to take notes as you listen, but you're listening for, what does this story have to do with vision? So here's my first one. I had a friend named Joanne who was an incredibly elegant woman. She was tall, she moved with grace, she always had a cigarette in her hand. She was very alone in her own family of origin. She had 2 aunts that were very, very distant. And so she married, and she married into not only a family, but a family business. And her elegance made her what the family actually referred to as, Joanne is an asset to us, to our work. She's Grace Kelly with a cigarette. She got lung cancer, and it went to her brain. And because she was fairly, you know, if you're an asset, you're sort of not completely a person to a family. And she didn't have much family of her own. So she called me and asked me if I would come and sit with her. So over a pretty long period of her treatment, I would go and sit with her. And one day I was sitting with her, and I don't know where this question came from, but I said, Joanne, what do you think you'll do when you are well? And she was silent a really, really long time. And then she said, I think I'll paint the living room. And I knew she was going to die. Right then, I knew she was going to die. Second vignette. I love to read stories about people who climb Mount Everest, about the resilience it takes, about the struggles, about the strategy, about how people find their way. But as you read those stories, you begin to notice that there are people who get so focused on the peak that they forget they have to come down, and they don't save enough energy to get down the mountain, and they often die on the descent. There was one story I read about a man who he was almost at the peak, and he realized he was running out of steam, and he didn't think he was going to make it down. He had a sat phone. He called his daughter because he wanted to be sure he was able to talk to her before what he thought was going to happen was going to happen. And she said to him, Dad, that simply was not the deal. You promised that you would come home. And he made it. Third vignette. I was working with an Episcopal priest who had gone to a congregation that rented part of their church to a day school, as many churches do. And as happens in many of those circumstances, the day school had taken over the whole church. And not for rent, just they oozed into all the space. And one day he got to the sanctuary for a funeral, and the altar had been carried out of the sanctuary, and where the altar should have been were the cots for children to take their naps on. And he said, right then and there, I knew this was done. But he got a plan. He had a vision. He talked to his congregation. If we could clear out this space, we could open the community hall to people who never come to church. We could become a gathering place for our little community here. He worked with the school. They actually found better space. They left. They weren't unhappy. The congregation was thrilled. This great new ministry was going to happen. 2 years later, they had one event. And the people started to grumble, and they were upset. Well, at least we were getting income out of this before. And so I said to the priest, so what did you mean when you said community gathering place? And I sat there a long time, and he had nothing to say. So the church continued to get more negative, and eventually he had to leave. That's a vignette. Really short one. I have a friend who was a nurse who was walking with another nurse, and as they were walking down the street, they saw a motorcycle and a truck in a horrible collision. And the motorcycle skidded down the road, and the guy on the motorcycle skidded down the road. So he was fairly injured. And my friend's companion nurse walked over, got down on her knees, and whispered in his ear, the accident is over. Direct all your energy to your healing. And she stayed with him. And he lived. Final one. This is an Ed Friedman story. Ed was working with a man who had some kind of illness. I can't remember what it was, but the illness, the only thing they could offer for it was an operation that only 20% of people survived. And the man said, done. His brother was a surgeon. He didn't even talk to his brother about risks or anything. He just said, done. And Ed said, well, why'd you jump at that so quick? And he said, because I was going to be one of the 20%. And then Ed thought, well, this is an interesting man. I like how he thinks. I'm going to ask him another question. So he told him the story, which I think has been a movie now, of the Indianapolis, that dropped off the last part of the atomic bomb, and then on its way back was torpedoed in the Sea of Japan. And it happened so fast they couldn't send out a mayday, so these 800 sailors were just floating in these shark-infested waters. And it was to their advantage to stay together, but a large number of them swam away. And Ed said, "What do you think about those people that swam away?" And the man said, "They ain't got no future. They didn't have a plan." I think all those stories say something about what vision is, what it offers, what it asks, and how we either have it as a resource or not. So I want you to take 3 minutes. Do you have something to write with? You have something to write with? Write for 3 minutes with both hands, dominant hand, non-dominant hand. Draw with the non-dominant if that's easier for you. What did you hear about vision? What seems like a statement about what is vision? What goes into vision? And then we'll come back. So what kind of things came into your attention? You can unmute yourself and just say, "This is Bill," or "This is Heather," or "This is Gretchen."
I thought there were several things. There was a plan, a goal, a purpose, a commitment.
Good. Anybody else?
This is Eric.
Hi, Eric.
There are, typically options, seeking broad input from different sources. And I think this was already said, or actually understanding resources as well was something I wrote down.
This is Bill. I saw a reframing of the situation, usually reframing a negative into something more positive and forward-looking.
This is Angeli. I just put that because they're all different, to expect the worst, plan for the best, and accept what is and what may come.
Mhm. Anybody else?
Hi, this is John. It provides incentive to act, maybe even to make life choices, that are
Mhm.
important.
Mm-hmm. Other folks. Some of the things I hear in these stories I think vision comes in on the side of deeper connection to the self and the resource in the self, deeper connection to family that is resource for us, strangers that are resource for us, and what happens in the lack of that connectivity. How in some ways the vision is shrunk, the possibility is shrunk, so that there's connectivity is an important piece of vision and understanding it. Chanel, can we do dots and cubes, please?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. So she's sharing screen for us with some graphics for just a minute. So the one with the dots.
Yes, I'm just finding it. Just
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So look at the X and try to keep your focus on the X and notice what happens. What are you noticing?
I'm noticing two things at once, both the cube and the holes as they create something.
Yes. What else are you noticing?
They're all connected.
They're all connected. Anybody else?
To me, when you focus on the X, it just becomes more a grouping of circles rather than I lose the cube.
Uh-huh. Different dimensions. Thank you, Angelique. Thanks, Chanel.
You're welcome.
So pardon? So one of the things is that tells you something about how your brain looks. Does it see connection? Does it see disconnection? So it says just something about how how vision is configured in your head, in your body, in your being. But the other thing it invites us to think about is in vision, there is always connectivity and there's always a pattern of connectivity. And the challenge sometimes is to figure it out. So sometimes it's working out the connectivity in ourselves. So if you're a person of faith, is this God's voice? Is this my parents' voice? Is this my voice? Is this really my vocation? So there's all that connectivity that has to be worked out and sorted through so that, because vision that doesn't come out of self and a profound and deep self-understanding will not sustain. So vision has to come out of self and the capacity to see what we need to see. Sometimes it's a matter of being able to see the patterns outside ourselves that need to line up in order for us to move forward with something we're trying to accomplish or would like to see happen or believe is possible in the world. But being able to see not only the entities, so lots of times when we're trying to work on something, we're having little condo tiff here, like nobody else condo boards have tiffs, right? But you know, it's real easy to get focused on the people and not on what's going on between the people. And it's what's going on between the people that is going to make a difference in whether or not the vision can move forward. So learning to see the patterns of connectivity. So the nurse believed that any human could offer compassion and encouragement to any other human. There was a pattern of connectivity for her there that came out of her vocation as nurse. Nurse sees pain, has a belief about life, what supports life, connects. Another person would not have had that vision so quickly available to them to hit that street with those words. Connectivity would not live in them in the same way. Might live in them in a different way about a different thing. Are you with me? There's always connectivity in vision. And we're always, so when the man calls his daughter and she calls him out, Dad, that's not the deal. He knew that she would offer him something he needed. Their connection was powerful enough to supplement his lack of vision, which was thinking about getting down. Connectivity can be useful to us. It can also trap us if we can't see that we're in it. Connectivity can also be anxiety producing. So it's learning to see the pattern and putting it to our best advantage. That's part of vision. Because if you have a vision and it's just yours, then it's not really very useful, is it? I mean, if it doesn't have any, if it doesn't give life to the world, if it doesn't bear fruit, if it doesn't call forth something in other people, if it doesn't inspire, and it's really easy to hold a vision if I'm not dealing with anybody. You know, if I'm just sitting here in my little study, like I've been doing a lot of lately, I am really great at spinning the vision, but as soon as I have to walk out the door and deal with my husband, it becomes a whole different thing. Because I haven't thought about the connectivity of that. So there's connectivity in vision. You with me? Sometimes it's the connectivity between ideas. So I have really strong training in liturgy. I have really strong training as a pastor, and I also have really strong family systems training. And those three disciplines don't always talk to each other. And so part of the connectivity that's been part of my work about my vision for my life is how do those things support one another towards my bigger goal for my life? How do they not just live as separate dots? Because when you live it like that, you don't live an integrated life. And so the vision is weaker. It's not absent, but it might be weaker. Which leads me to the next thing is vision, and some of you touched on this a little bit. It flows from our deeply held beliefs about what it means to be a self, what it means to be me. What are my convictions? What are the things that are constitutive of my understanding of what it means to be human? Vision has to honor those and flow out of those. One of the family systems teachers, Murray Bowen, used to make you write a paper, and he called it your belief paper. I believe to be a self means. I believe to be a self means. I believe to be a self means. That was very hard to write. It sounds easy, but it was very hard to write. What are those most precious things that if they were taken from us, we would not feel whole? But in ourselves, the things that form our own hearts, our own passions, whatever word you want to use for what motivates you in the world. So vision has to flow out of that. And so like one of the places the priest got hooked up was he didn't believe altars in churches were to be moved. But instead of talking about the altar, he got focused on the nursery school. And then he had to think about another space. And so his altar love got left behind, and his vision went awry because he lost his altar in his vision. Now, there are lots of ways to bring an altar into a social hall that's a metaphorical altar. But he didn't carry that with him. So he won one battle, but he hadn't spun out what was essential to him far enough to have the compelling power to get him all the way through. You with me? So that's the other part of it. Whatever vision is, it has to be big enough to give us the stamina, the resilience, the strength, the courage we need to get through any hard thing. Whether that's death. The reason I knew my friend Joanne was going to die was she didn't have enough to get through. She had not enough. Painting the living room is not enough to live for, friends. There's no connectivity in that. There's no personal belief in that. There's not enough in that to sustain life. Or even to give her a good death. She didn't die a very pretty death. So whatever vision is, it has to have that. So, I mean, part of what I have worked on in my life, I mean, where I would articulate part of my own personal vision right now is, if it doesn't have the power to carry me through life and death and life beyond death, I am not giving it any more of my time. I can't think of how many meetings I have sat through that I will never get that time back. I'm not doing that anymore. What I want to do is I want to see the spark of awareness in people's eyes. I want to see them take something that I'm able to offer and take it out into the world and do something with it I couldn't have imagined a person being able to do. That's what drives me. That's my vision. Is it generative? Is it life-giving? And if it's not, I'm not doing that. Vision has that sense of being able to sustain. It also has to have a connection to the past. So like, our roots are important. What shaped us are important. What came into our thinking is important, because all that stuff lives in your brain. So there's that old joke about the woman who cut the roast off, the end of the roast off in the pan. And she did it because her mother did it, not because her pan was too small. All those things we learned early on from grandmothers and grandfathers, they are still in our brain. They are alive in our brain. So we have to we have to have connection to that. That connectivity has to be there. However, if that's all we can see, then we're in trouble. So we need to be able to touch it, use that in it, which is useful to us, but we have to put ourselves in it and the new connections that we hope for. So it has to have movement. People who cut off from history don't fare well. Their vision is not as deep. Their health is not as good. Their connectivity capacity is lessened. It's not that you have to worship it. It's not that you have to visit at its altar of the history all the time, but you have to have an awareness of it, and you have to know it lives in you, and you can't pretend it doesn't. The very things that you are able to think because of the connectivity that your neurons made when you were 2. I mean, this is a weird thought, but your grandparents live in the way your brain is wired. Your ancestors live in the way your brain is wired. So you've got to take that into consideration. It does not have to determine what's constitutive of you going forward, what you want to hold and value in your life going forward. That's the vision part of you. So part of Joanne's problem is she had no history to touch. She had no one to go back to, and she was subsumed into somebody else's family, but it wasn't really as a person. It was as a an asset. It was something that could be used, put to good use for them. That's a compromised person because they don't have any roots. So let me stop and see what you're thinking. These are some of the things I think were in those vignettes that are about vision. Questions, thoughts?
This is Eric. I just wanted to say that, you know, the points about connectedness and not being outside of, you know, or allow ourselves to be outside of our own brains and to take in, again, some of the items I mentioned earlier about different sources and looking at resources. You know, goes back to a lot of us, including myself. We did a study on the Enneagram back with one of the church groups I'm involved in, and from there, you know, there's many of the Enneagram types are, you know, mind center, and as a result, they kind of live in their own minds. And you know, some of the points you brought up about connectivity and looking also at you know, what's sustainable and life-giving and not what's just present at the moment. You know, kind of rung a few bells in my head at least.
Good. Other thoughts? So
Hi,
go, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, the connection is so important with other people, but at the same time, there's toxic relationships, whether it's in the workplace or within the family. And sometimes, you know, it's, I guess, discerning between the good connections and the bad connections, and whether you emotionally invest in one or not the other. I mean, it's easy to get sucked into, you know, a negativity that comes from the connections. I don't know how many people who hate their job because they hate their boss. It's not what they do, but it's who they have to work with. So, you know, how you navigate that and ultimately try to find yourself in all that can be real difficult, I think.
Well, and I'm not suggesting you should take them to raise. I'm just suggesting that you need to be aware of the way they can either hinder vision or maybe some ways they can support it, even if it's just fine. What is the nature of the connection and how can it be useful, if it can be useful? And if it can't be useful, just be aware that the power of sabotage lives there, and so be smart about it. Be smart about it. Don't think you can just ignore it, because you can't. There's a connectivity. And I would suggest vision is much bigger than one's workplace. A vision of a self for a life is much bigger than one's workplace. That may be one of the connections you're paying attention to. Maybe work is just one big connection. It may be one of those dots, but your vision is engaged with 4 other dots. And you're just having to keep that one in your awareness. Does that make sense? So, anybody else before we? So what I'm trying to say is vision is, we don't think our way to vision in the way that we're used to. Vision is an emotional process that comes out of a deep and profound understanding of ourselves, who we are, what's important to us, where we came from, where we want to go. And it is not the same thing as what many of us have sat in rooms and done a lot of, which is mission statements, vision statements, goals, objectives. That is not the way I'm using the word vision. Institutions need those. They serve purpose, but they are often not life-giving in my humble experience. They do not do what I'm trying to suggest that vision does. Vision, when I say vision is an emotional process, here's the best possible example I've been able to come up with. Because a lot of this is hard for me to talk about because it's sort of right brain. but vision is like when you're standing at the beach and it's sunrise or sunset, and you're looking out at that vast expanse and that liminal space where the sky and the water touch, and you feel energy coming out of your feet and up through your body and out through your heart and towards that beauty. Have you had that experience? Just being totally lifted out of yourself and towards beauty. Maybe for you it's not the ocean, maybe it's some other place, maybe it's a tree, but can you identify with that sense of energy moving through your body up and out towards something beautiful? Vision feels like that. When we discover the vision that is going to give us life, it feels like that. And once you've touched that, lesser things won't hold. I mean, you still have to do them. They're still part of your life. They're still part of your work. But vision is bigger, deeper, broader, and it has more clarity to it because it comes out of you. You know, so often when you're trying to live into a mission statement that an institution gives you, it's not yours, and you don't have a clue what it means or what you're supposed to do with it. Or you don't even really agree with it. I'm part of an institution that part of their vision is to be a place of Christian hospitality. Well, I think hospitality asks things of host and guest, but they only think it means be great hosts. So I don't even really agree with it. So it's a struggle for me to be in that place. We all have those things. That doesn't take away my own vision for my life, which is, how can I find the life-giving place in this conversation? What can I contribute to this conversation that might get a twinkle in somebody's eye who goes, I get that. And because it's mine, and because it has that energy connected to it, it gives me stamina for the conversation. It gives me stamina to give a little bit of time to that work. Let me stop there and see, is that an experience you can identify with? That's what I mean when I say vision is an emotional process. We can't think our way into that experience of the sunrise. We enter it through our right brain, and our inner brain with energy comes alongside. But if we tried to rationalize our way in it, well, that's the refraction of the light off the water and blah, 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 blah. It's not the same experience, unless maybe you're a scientist and that's your vocation. That's your vision. That's what really sparks life for you. Then understanding the intricate beauty of all of that is a whole different conversation. You with me? Thoughts? Questions?
I think vision also, my best friend and I, we were just talking about this weekend, you know, it has to do a lot with your passions and where your heartstrings are and what pulls you and which direction and where your energy is coming from. And if you can kind of consume that wholly for yourself, you know, then you can be there. And what I always tell them is, like, if you take care of yourself and you understand self, then you can take care of others in service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's some truth to that.
So if you're predominantly, you know, if you're right hand dominant, which means you're left brain dominant, how do you get more access to the right brain where some of this process happens? Or is it serendipitous and it just kind of happens to you?
Write with your left hand, draw with your left hand, start walking with your left foot. Take your question into nature and find it. Find the answer in nature. Music, rhythm, art, anything that pulls you towards another modality. breath, meditation. A great way to invoke your right brain is whatever your dilemma is, right before you go to sleep, ask your brain to give you the answer in the night and keep a pen and paper by your bed. And when it comes, honor your brain by writing it down in the middle of the night. Because you can get into that kind of dialogue with yourself and that part of your brain, because that'll come out of your sleeping, dreaming brain, and so that'll be different. So, Chanel, can we have the cube, please? Go ahead, Eric, while she's putting that up. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to reference the one of the questions we had for homework regarding what you become when you do what you love to do. So, thought that question, I think, was very relatable to the topics that were just discussed.
Yes, it is. Now, I want you to find a point on this cube and try to hold it still for 30 seconds. Any point and try to hold it still. Don't let it move. What did you notice?
That everything else around it moved.
Everything else around it moved.
Yeah.
What else did you notice?
My brain went flat.
Brain went flat.
And it just like there was no interest in doing this task.
Huh. Did anybody see it flip?
Yeah, I did.
You saw it flip?
It was either a quarter close to me or a quarter farther away from me.
So sometimes it looks like it's turning, right? Anybody else notice anything?
You see, depending upon your.
Sorry, didn't hear that. Say it again. Okay. Most people can't hold this thing still for 10 seconds. Thank you, Chanel. Because the brain looks for change every 10 seconds. Every 10 seconds, the brain wants something new. So there's a function in the brain where every 10 seconds it's sweeping the brain going, what's new, what's new, what's new, what's new? And it will play with things, new positions. So you're seeing that shift, that shift, that shift. So once we can articulate a vision, that gives our vision intention. So we know where we're going. We know what we're looking for. We know what we're after. We know what direction we're headed. Then the brain comes right in behind that to help us. And every 10 seconds, it's offering us newness. And so how I think about that is, out of my intention, I pay attention to what the brain puts there. And if it fits my vision, it's mine to pull in. So when I'm working on a presentation like this, the way I get those vignettes is I pay attention because I had intention, and the brain gives me what I need and I pull it in. That is such a different position in terms of holding on and supporting vision than feeling like it's always up to me efforting. I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do this and I got to organize that and I got to find that. The brain is trying to help us to bring the things we need in order that we can operate with resilience and continue to mature our vision. And so every time that thing flips, when I talked last week about practicing newness, capturing change. So I'm practicing with my vision. And then all of a sudden there's this little blip in the cube and I go, ah, Capture, I need that. Capture, I need that. And you begin to layer your vision with deeper and deeper ways of articulating it, ways of embodying it, ways of living it out, ways of thinking about it. And to me, it's just such, I live with more ease because I don't have to make all the effort. Now, that's not to say you don't have to strategize and organize and plan and work towards a vision, but there's also this provision that our brain offers us. But we have to be able to pay attention to it. So that's why the noticing question is so important. Can we notice what gets placed in our attention? Because 9 times out of 10, have you ever had that experience where something comes into your mind and you don't know why, but it was exactly what you needed? Or you're sitting in a meeting and somebody's desperately got to say something, and somehow somebody says exactly what needs to be said, and everything shifts. That's the power of that flip in the brain. If we can pay attention to it's happening and it's being there and pulling it in support of our work. So that makes sense? Did you see it happen? So it's a matter of, that's what I mean when I'm saying capturing change. So when I'm trying to embody my vision and do it deeper and broader and wider, I'm looking for what I can pull into myself, that my brain is going, there it is, there it is, there it is, outside of my awareness, my conscious awareness. But because I have put intention in my brain, because my vision has come deeply out of my own being, my brain knows it's me and knows that's what I need. And so it pulls it in. Other thoughts or questions, because we're getting close to our time here. Let me just say a quick word about anxiety, and then I think we're at 4:45. What anxiety does is tightens up everything. It shuts down our imagination. It clogs up our ability to connect. It disconnects parts of the brain that need to work together. It can get so chronic that we literally can't see what's right in front of us. I don't know if you've ever been in a hospital with somebody who's been taken in like for an emergency, and they put all those papers in front of them, and people literally can't fill it out because they're so anxious, they literally can't see what's in front of them. They're not being difficult. The anxiety changes their vision. When we're anxious, our vision goes peripheral. It's looking for danger. It's scanning the room out there. It's not interested in what's right in front of it because it can't focus there. So it makes us serious. Anxiety seriouses us up. It makes us willful, my way or the highway. It makes us not be able to function differently. When we're anxious, we can't make choices about our functioning. We just keep doing what we're doing and thinking what we're thinking, and that will not live in the service of vision. So anxiety undercuts our capacity to do the other things we've been talking about. And those other things we've been talking about are, to my way of thinking, the more life-giving, hopeful places to live. Hopeful, not optimistic. Optimistic is not the same thing. Hope is deeper. So that's about our time. Questions, comments? I want to give you, I have one resource I want to give you, but anything anybody needs to ask, say. There's a DVD that I deeply love by the sculptor, about the sculptor Andy Goldsworthy. Do any of you know his work? He is a British sculptor who lives in Scotland. He has a piece in the East Wing of the National Gallery. He works with water, icicles, stone, plants, rock, and it's a beautiful video of him working and him talking about what he's thinking about while he's working. And he talks about the art colleges being so stifling and how his art came alive when he found nature. And it shows him failing. He's building these things of stone and they all fall down, and he collapses for a little moment, and then he says, clearly I don't understand the stone. I'm not connected. He talks about the role of color. He talks about what his community and what the history of the place offers to his art. It's like a meditation on vision and resilience. And it's in little chapters, so you don't have to watch it all at once. It's a deeply beautiful piece. And I think you can see some of the things I've been trying to describe in actually watching him do some of those things and then create things out of his being that are really beautiful. So that's another option for getting in touch with Andy Goldsworthy. It's called Rivers and Tides is the name of the DVD. So thank you all. Hope this has been good for you on a Friday afternoon. Be well, be safe. Thank you, Chanel, for the help. Appreciate it so much. My wonderful tech assistant. She's my angel today. I appreciate it. So thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you.